Men are clearly suffering, so why do we refuse to go to therapy? Well, maybe it's a joke that men would rather go and build their body or build a business than break down in therapy, or maybe there's a reason why young boys, middle-aged men, and even older men refuse to go into a therapist's office. Maybe there's something about the male heart and the male psyche which needs something different from the feminine heart and the feminine psyche. The latest statistics from UK and American studies, to the best of my awareness, show that between 70 and 80% of therapists and therapy attendees are women. So where's the space for men? Why is it that talk therapy, the process of going through your emotions and empathic, non-judgmental listening, can often leave a man feeling worse? And it can leave a woman feeling better, like she's been hurt, like she's gotten through something that was on her chest, but the man can sometimes feel like he's actually more useless than ever before. My experience working with both men and women in therapeutic space brings up a controversial idea that men need different things from women. The male heart is wounded in different ways to the female heart, and most men, if they're honest, would rather be in a building energy than a breakdown energy. There's a reason that when I'm in a session with men, after half an hour of them talking about their relationship issue with their girlfriend, there comes the moment when I say, well, where would you like to go next? And they say, what can I do about this? Or, what should I say to her? Or, what's the next step? Or, what action can I take? Whereas women, generalizing again, the woman who I work with, and she does half an hour of talking about her issue with her boyfriend, and I say, well, where do we go next? They say, I'd quite like to go on to this issue related to my health. I'd quite like to go on to this issue. They switch topics. It's a very interesting pattern to notice. Women, generally speaking, in therapeutic space, don't seek out an action-oriented healing outcome unless I bring it up as a facilitator, which is why a therapeutic session can often cover way more breadth, but sometimes not as much depth, or at least not actionable depth, if it's a purely feminine to feminine way of relating. If I'm facilitating the healing of a woman, of course, her own self-healing process, and I'm massively generalizing for a YouTube video, they will cover more ground in a quicker period of time than the man who wants to be more linear, more problem-oriented towards the relationship or the business or the family. And often my job is to make the connections between and also honor their desire to bring about action. They will feel much better 1 month into our sessions when every single session we end with accountability and end with follow-through in the best of a life coaching kind of style. Whereas a woman, although she will benefit from that, doesn't seem to need that in terms of the healing moment itself. It's almost as if most women will feel quite liberated, quite cathartically healed from just the moment of witnessing and listening, because often we don't get anyone who listens to us at depth and people who refuse to be present with us in our pain. For a woman who's sensitive, just to be there with her and say, I get it. That must have really hurt. I'm sorry. A man will feel the release of that. A woman will feel the release plus a resolution. She often doesn't need this structuring, action-oriented way of making the therapy session a real-life occurrence because it just disappears in that moment, of course. A good facilitator, or maybe not a good therapist, this is where I have my issue with the therapy space, a good facilitator will then offer suggestions or indication towards action which could be taken, i.e., you seem to have this relationship issue, maybe you shouldn't date this kind of person again. Are there any rules or boundaries that we could put in place? Conventional therapeutic talk therapy approach may suggest to never offer advice, and that's why I think it doesn't work for most men. The reason that men are rejecting their masculinity within the therapeutic environment is that there isn't necessarily a space for the masculine soul. The masculine soul wants action. He wants structure, he wants direction, he wants an ability to take all of that energy that comes up in a therapeutic space and do something with it. Women tend to be happier just being. They can be in the healing energy, and then naturally they'll start to take the action. They're not completely exempt from a desire to want to take action, of course. you work with a man or a woman, there's much crossover. But for the sake of a video like this, I'm trying to really make a case for why men need something different from their therapeutic support. So that leads us to today's question in a very roundabout way on this idea of how can we help broken boys retain their masculinity while also healing their trauma. Today's question, let me bring it up. I'm going to put it on the screen for a few moments while I'm speaking and then not actually read it all the way out. You can pause it and read it if you want in full. The main area that I want to focus on, taking it off the screen now, is this idea that when men realize that they're emotionally dysregulated and caught in certain patterns related to who they find attractive and the kind of relationships that they keep stumbling into, and then they go deeper into the esoteric space, this sentence came back up in the question. Cultivating my masculine side has been a godsend in my emotional maturity and stability, but it just gets me wondering, is what was unconscious my animus? First half of that sentence, it's been a godsend for his emotional maturity and stability. Men require safety on the outside and the inside, but if given a choice, a man will respond to trauma by building externally before he feels comfortable enough to go inwards. This is why it's genuinely and generally, both at once, a generalization and a genuine point, bit of a difficult language there. Most men would rather build their business and they'd rather build their body, because if they've got financial security and if they've got physical status, i.e. I look in the mirror and like what I see, they can then slow down just a little bit to go behind the mask, go behind the persona, and realize that things are not working. Of course, a man can have a very successful business and still reach the point in midlife where it all breaks through and they realize that they have things from childhood which really do still hurt. But it's better for men, by and large, to have their external life in place, or at the very least have this double-wedded process where their internal health and their external health is threaded together. They get to work on their inner child wounds while also showing up as a man who is building something in the world in an everyday sense without feeling like their inner child is going to take over and they're going to be dropped into dissolved therapeutic space without the ability to be a man, whatever that means for them. But generally what it means for the men that I work with is an ability to show up in the world, be someone worthy of respect, be someone worthy of love, and be able to give love, respect, and generative contribution to the people who mean something to them. It's to show up as a strong boyfriend. It's to show up as a strong leader. It's to be a trustworthy parent. And they know that fulfilling those roles also gives back to them in terms of their mental health. Men have a deep wiring for status, and I don't think that we should dismiss this as something that's a male ego or some kind of fragile situation. A man who feels low status is much more likely to be depressed and take his own life than a man who feels like he's high status. There are a few exceptions at the top of very successful men who will still end up in those dreadful situations, but the majority of men who are really suffering with their mental health are also men who are low status, whatever that might mean. It could be just perceived low status. It could be that they're the poorest CEO in their community, and that comparatively feels like a lower status. Their brain almost shuts down. I haven't got the exact scientific findings of neuroscience for this, but there's very interesting studies about what happens to men who feel like they're losing their fight in regards to business environments, or what it feels like that they're not quite the man in the room. They aren't someone worthy of listening to. Male mental health diminishes rapidly in a way that female mental health doesn't. Women generally don't have this feeling of not earning as much. If they're not earning as much as their colleague at work, they don't have this massive, like, oh, I'm just not good enough, real shame-based response. Sure, they may have some of this related to looks, or related to beauty or desirability, or related to their ability to be a good mother. I'm generalizing. But men are deeply, deeply affected by status, and if they can build externally in a very masculine, very healthy form where they rise up in a public sense and they get rewarded for that because they did something useful, it's very easy for them to be much happier with themselves. I noticed in my own journey that my low mental health in my teenage years has progressively become higher and higher, and then very rapidly quite enjoyable on the inside based on how successful I was on the outside. Of course, I've done years of inner work. I'm very much into trauma therapy. I'm very much into the somatic physical nervous system regulation. But if I were to imagine I did none of that and just went and built a business, had successful romantic relationships, had some great friendships, had some great brotherhoods, and did all these things, I think my mental health would naturally improve. Men don't tend to seek out therapy as the first option because there's something about the male psyche which encourages us to go out there to fix in here, whereas women tend to be more close to their heart and they realize, oh, it's an in here issue, and they go straight to the source, which is why it's a 70% to 80% dominance of women in therapeutic space. Of course, there's a limited moment where that no longer works and women need action and they need masculine structure. It's very difficult to make a video like this. You can see that I'm stumbling around in generalizations just in case someone catches a soundbite of what I say and think that I'm overly stereotyping men and women, and the reality is I cannot capture even a fraction of what it's like to work with someone for 4 months, to see their trauma story, to see their awakening process, to see their unburdening process, and be there week in, week out as they go through this painful and beautiful experience, and try and capture that while anonymizing them to protect their confidentiality, and then dozens of these stories all playing in my mind at once. But there are the men that I work with, capturing however many men, let's say a dozen men that I've worked with, putting it down, and again, interestingly, the male to female split in my private practice, the facilitating that I do, I'm not a clinical psychologist, I'm not a medical doctor, I'm someone who encourages adults to do the work for themselves, and I definitely work more as a coach who's trauma-informed. But even within my practice, I'd say it's about 70%, 30%. 7 out of 10 of my clients are women. Only 3 out of 10 are men, and the men that I do work with are usually quite sensitive, quite intelligent, quite creative men who also want to go and do things in the world. There's very naturally that moment, as I indicated earlier in the video, where they say, okay, Jordan, I think I've got it. I think that's everything I needed to say. I'll have a conversation with her. What should I say? Men seek advice. Men seek healthy mentorship. When there's respect between men, we ask each other what to do, and we really appreciate being told what to do by someone who's outside of our situation, who we can trust. And this goes this goes massively against the conventional talk therapy model, which is to not give advice. And you'll see such a tragedy when this happens. Men can sometimes feel like they lost all respect for their therapist when they just bared their heart for an hour or 2 hours in a row and ask, what do you think I should do? And then the therapist, usually a woman, very well-meaning, will say, well, what do you want to do? And there's no right or wrong answer. What do you feel? Yes, that works, but it works less than giving a man something that he can take as an action and experiment with in the next week. There needs to be a degree of feeling like you're in the game with him, because if you lean all the way back, it's not going to feel like he's got an ally. It's going to feel like he's got a distant, observed parental figure who's kind of letting him figure it out for himself, which is the best intention. But in reality, if he's struggling through something, he's going to feel like he's abandoned. Men feel abandoned occasionally in conventional therapy when they're not given guidance and structure, because most men who end up in a therapeutic setting or require a therapeutic setting have usually got some issues with their father and issues with masculinity as a whole, and usually their own masculinity, their own emotional dysregulation up and down, that they need some reliable structure. They need healthy male friendships. They need a healthy sense of masculinity. And if we're encouraging men to step into female-dominated therapeutic space, which is wonderful and has so many benefits, I use a lot of feminine-based skills and techniques in my work, but I'm also fundamentally masculine in my orientation, so it is structure, and it is things like, if you're going to work with me, you can't drink, you can't smoke, there's no drugs, and it's going to be very intense reading, very intense homework, very intense consistent effort over 4 months. There's not an anything goes strategy, because we've had enough of that. Most people who come to work with me have had 2 or 3 previous therapists, sometimes people who are decades of experience down the road, and they still come to me for a moment of, well, I kind of got my feelings out there and I understand what's happening on the inside, but what do I do about this? It comes full circle to the what do I do about this moment, and I'm never telling someone what to do. That's not good therapy, that's not even good coaching, but I'm willing to enter into the game and actually put my skin in the game and say, if it was me, this is what I would do. And men really appreciate that. Women appreciate it too, of course, but men really appreciate it because it feels like they're actually by your side. Whereas talk therapy feels a lot like face-to-face, or sometimes for a man who's struggling, feels like someone's looming behind them and they're not actually stepping in. They're not really present with someone's emotions, because if a man, this is male psyche for you, men bond with other men based on activities. It's a classic evolutionary psychology perspective that women will tend to enjoy coming together for coffee dates and just going for a casual walk, and men can enjoy this as well. But men primarily will enjoy going out and playing some football, going out on a challenging hike, or building something together in the garage. They want to bond over tools and processes. So when you can get their life out there, like a project, their relationship, their business, their health, their childhood trauma, and you both tinker on it together like it were a job in the mechanics, or like it was a hill that you needed to climb, men feel so much more engaged, they feel so much more seen. And that's missing from conventional therapy. It's why the questioner today said that they felt so much better, so much more regulated when they're focused on their masculinity. And we could go into the questions of, well, what's the deeper psychology of attracting certain types of romantic partners, or certain types of inner experiences that take over when we're feeling weak or we're feeling compulsive. But the fundamental thread is helping men to reaccess healthy masculinity, and understanding that healthy masculinity requires masculine healing space. It's why it's getting more and more popular to see men's work circles, or groups of men who come together for a weekend, for a workshop, or several months of working together in a digital group space, and they sharpen each other. They're there for each other in a way that only men can be there for each other, and women, unfortunately, can rarely hold that capacity for anger and ambition, which is a very particularly male problem. The anger, ambition, anger, ambition kind of, what's the word? Fixity. The fixity of that particular pain point in most men is something like a healthy guilt, not an unhealthy guilt shamed from above of a father figure that said, no, you're not doing good enough. The healthy guilt of, I'm meant to be doing more. I'm frustrated because I know I have greater potential. I know I could be earning more money. I know I could be a better husband. I know. That feeling of deep knowing, wrapped in the healthy guilt that they're not living up to their expectations, and someone who steps in as a therapeutic support to say, let's fix this. Let's cut away these habits. Let's get you to the place that you want to be. And it's so action-oriented that will actually increase their mental health way more than going 10 hours deep onto why they feel like they need to be ambitious, why they feel like they need to be striving, why they feel like they're getting so aggressive and so angry, and maybe this is all to do with your father, and maybe it's okay to just be and not have to do anything. It's a bit of a contradiction, because some of that is appropriate, but it's a small percentage of the therapeutic work. In a 2-hour session, that's maybe 15 minutes. At tops. There's different ways of therapeutically working with men, but at the very least, we don't want to accidentally invite men into therapeutic space, and it takes them a hell of a lot of courage to get in that therapist's door, and then they're subtly disvalidated by a very well-meaning, very qualified woman who's nonetheless lopsided in the feminine-oriented approach to healing, which won't work for him, because he's going to feel unintentionally shamed, and he's going to feel like you're trying to put out his fire rather than encouraging him to burn in the direction that would be healthy for him. There's so many areas I could go into. I hope that this video has at least brought the conversation up, and if you've watched this far into the video, I hope it's also clear that I've been massively generalizing throughout. Different women will need very masculine structures, and some men will need very feminine structures, but the shifting of the conversation towards why men don't go to therapy, it's because we need more male therapeutic spaces, and hopefully I've made a good case for that, and if there's some triggered comments in the comment section, well, so be it. That's part of showing up as a man who's suggesting that we might need to shift the tide in terms of what men need to heal, and I'm definitely here for the conversation because I see what happens behind closed doors, and I trust in these ideas. Hopefully we can all get healthy. I believe that men deserve a great degree of mental support, and I look forward to the day where they get the support that they need in a way which is specifically masculine and doesn't have any element of shame about what the masculine heart needs to feel healthy and strong. I appreciate your attention. If it's brought up any ideas or any reflections, leave them down in the comments, especially if you're a man, because often we don't talk about these things, especially not in the comment section, and this is definitely the place for it. I appreciate your attention once more, and here's the next video in the series where we're going to be talking about more mental health issues and probably a little bit of trauma work or two. I'll see you over there.